Das war wie eine.
It was like an absolute release, like a liberation.
Also der Schmerz war weg.
The pain was gone. From today's perspective, I was already no longer here.
Hier irgendwo.
I can't describe it any other way. It's very difficult. And then this light came towards me, and I knew immediately, this is my eternal companion.
Herr Nikolaus, Sie sind als Buchautor und auch im Filmbereich tätig und
Mr. Nikolaus, you are active as a book author and also in the field of film, and there is a background to this. If I'm correctly informed, you had a near-death experience in 1985 and you would like to pass on inspiration from this experience and from your insights. I would like to talk to you about this experience and also about the far-reaching consequences for your life. First, however, I would like to ask you to tell me again how this experience came about at that time.
Ich war ein Jahr in der Schweiz zu einer Ausbildung und in Berlin hier schon einige Jahre verheiratet.
I spent a year in Switzerland to further my education, having already been married and living in Berlin for a few years.
War meiner Frau nicht so ganz recht.
Although we were still relatively young, my wife was unhappy with the long separation during my training, as she is more of a domestic and spontaneous person.
Hinausgeht. Und es war so, die
During our last phone call, before my 950-kilometer journey home,
die 950 Kilometer am Stück.
I sensed in her voice that something was
Ich
wrong.
habe irgendwas in der Stimme gehört, dass etwas nicht passt, dass etwas nicht stimmt.
You called your wife from Switzerland.
Genau.
Exactly.
Und
After such a long time, you can sense that something doesn't fit.
passt, ne? Und ich habe, da sind alle
That's when all my alarm bells went off.
Und ich bin ins Auto und nach Hause gefahren und
I got in the car, drove home, showed up a little early, and caught her red-handed.
Und dieser Moment war, wie soll ich sagen?
That moment was like a stab in the heart.
Das hätte ich also nicht
I didn't
erwartet,
expect
obwohl ich
that,
in dieser Ehe
although I wasn't the absolute angel in this marriage either.
immer zwei
It takes two to tango, and today there is no more blaming at all.
vorhanden ist, ja. Und aber dieser Moment hat mich so mitgenommen.
But this moment affected me so much that I was so, as the Berliner says,
dass ich,
out of sorts, that I went outside and I didn't know what to do.
sollte und überlegte, in diesem Moment saß
I sat on a stone on the grass on the side in this street, and I was overcome by a feeling of absolute deep emptiness
ein Gefühl der absoluten Tiefe,
that I had never felt before.
noch nie empfunden hatte. Und diese Lehre hat mich mehr erschreckt. Diese Fähigkeit in diesem Moment hätte ich eine
If I'd had a gun, I would have shot without batting an eyelid.
ohne mit der Wimper zu zucken. Und das hat mich
I was so frightened of myself that I got into the car, drove to a patch of woods near here where I couldn't have been found,
mit einem
and used a vacuum cleaner hose to direct the exhaust fumes inside through the tailgate. It's such a terrible smell.
Gase reingeleitet.
After 2 minutes, I thought,
In einen Wald.
turn off the engine, you can't stand it. Burning a litre of petrol produces almost a litre of water, and the rear window fogged up as if it was raining from inside. I opened the door and took a deep breath, but the will to end this pain was still there.
Einfach für mich
It was a way out of this pain for me.
aus diesem Schmerz.
It didn't take courage either, at least not in my situation.
Und dann stieg ich wieder ein.
Then I got back in and started the engine again.
Wieder den Motor und das blieb dann.
This is how it went in circles. I kept thinking,
Ich dachte immer wieder,
turn off the engine,
den Motor aus,
turn off the engine.
aber aus dieser Schleife.
But I never got out of this loop.
You actually did this several times?
Ich hab's
I did it several times, yes.
Und diese Schleife beendete nicht. Das
It was an endless loop that I couldn't get out of.
Und ich bin da nicht mehr rausgekommen und dann wurde es still.
Then it became quiet, but I still felt I existed. The thought was, you should be dead. It should be over. But it wasn't over. Then something came towards me. I felt very warm and taken care of. This absolute love, which is often described, was not yet there. It was like a kind of transition.
But the feeling of emptiness, of pain, that was gone?
The pain was gone, yes. It was like an absolute release, like a liberation. From today's perspective, I was already no longer here. I can't describe it any other way. It's very difficult. And then this light came towards me, and I knew immediately, this is my eternal companion. The name Jonas was in the room. I didn't give it to him. He just stood in the room. He was disembodied.
So you experienced the unexpected encounter with this being of light as something completely familiar, and the name was also immediately present?
Exactly. I knew immediately that he had already had a lot to do with me. My life was already very difficult anyway, also because of the consequences of the previous abuse. You're just different. I felt at that moment a kind of physical threshold that I wanted to cross. But he didn't allow that. He said, "Come, I'll show you the big stage of life." Through him, I was allowed to look at this stage of life, and of course, I was totally overwhelmed. And then came this great love. I have not seen light in this form. I saw a huge panorama all around me, above, below. I was really in the middle of it. I knew how everything worked, how and why things were connected, and what their meaning was. It was so overwhelming that of course I wanted to go there, and he didn't let me. It wasn't a defensive move, more like when someone wants to run and someone holds out their hand and says, "Stop, no further here." I was completely confused that I wasn't allowed to go any further. Then he just said, he wasn't speaking of course, "You're not done here yet. You still have something to look for here, something to find." I wanted to know what, of course. He said, "If I tell you this, it's like I'm reading from a book. Then you haven't internalized it. You have to experience it with all the pain, like now. I'll just say this. You'll be surprised who helps you through it."
Dann war dieser Moment, wie soll ich den beschreiben, des Verhaltens. Also ich war enttäuscht halt. Ne?
I was disappointed.
Und dann habe ich natürlich wieder dann in dem Moment,
And then, like flipping a switch, I was back in my body, lying next to the car. I don't know what it's called when you get these electric shocks.
Defibrillator.
Yes. And I felt this insane pain, as if someone was beating my chest with a club. I wanted to fight back, but I couldn't.
May I come back to Jonas at this point? How did you experience him? In complete trust? In a willingness to follow him unconditionally?
Unconditionally follow, absolutely, yes. As it appears today. I couldn't express it then. He is a friend from higher spheres, if I want to describe it that way. I don't like this expression angel or guardian angel so much. It's tainted with various other things. So, absolute protection and so on. And he guides me, and that's not it. I have to find my own way. He gives me pointers if it's going to help me in my development. But I always have a free choice with my free will as to where I go. And if it doesn't work out, okay, then I get the bumps here in life that are needed. And then the commentary comes.
Did you also experience anything like a review of your life, perhaps combined with some sort of evaluation?
No, he never judged, not even then. He stood there as an observer, as a companion who was not allowed to intervene, because free will is the supreme maxim.
Und aber nicht eingreifen dürfen, weil der freie Willen ist oberste Maxime.
So now you had this near-death experience in your heart. What happened next, professionally and especially in your relationship?
With my wife, of course, the divorce was imminent. We never saw each other again after that. That was very difficult for me because, of course, I had to start completely from scratch. That forced me even more to get involved with financially lucrative work. It was a bit of a zigzagging story. But the impression has remained. What can I do with these experiences now? I was already different from the others as a child, as a teenager, a bit on the outside. And now again, so in some spheres that the others can't do anything with. Of course, I talked about it a lot, and at best I got nasty looks. So I preferred to keep quiet.
Were you already familiar with the term near-death experience at that time?
Not at all. It was simply a taboo subject, just as abuse was a taboo subject at that time. Today, fortunately, it's different. Then I started researching on the internet and came across the term near-death experience. I then became a member of the near-death group in the Union Hilfswerk organization and met like-minded people without running the risk of being sidelined as crazy or something.
When did you join this group?
That was about 4 or 5 years ago now.
So you were in this state of limbo for years or decades, not being able to talk to anyone, and not really knowing yourself what you were actually experiencing.
Yes, that's true. I was alone with my impressions, more or less. You want to talk about it. It's like when you tell someone that you've been to the moon and that it's beautiful there, and they say, but the Earth is only a disk. So this discrepancy that you experience, you want to talk about something that the other person can't understand at all. I understand that. I was no different in the past.
Did your suicide attempt come out of the blue, so to speak? Or were there other situations in your life beforehand that had prepared you for such a thought?
Vorbelastet kann man vielleicht sagen, ja.
You could say that I was prejudiced. I was born in 1950 and lived through the post-war period. There wasn't much to eat, and we lived with many people in cramped basement flats. My father was a Russian prisoner for 3 years, but he never talked about it, so I don't know what he experienced there. We didn't have a warm relationship like I had with my grandmother or my mother. The assault started one day before my 5th birthday. My mother didn't know anything about it.
Meine Mutter bekam davon nichts mit. Es war ja, wie soll ich es beschreiben? Es ist ein Eingriff.
This is a violation of basic trust, which is immediately gone the first time. This story lasted for about 2 years. I wanted to tell my aunt and got a slap in the face for saying such a thing. My father had a double standard. on the one hand saying you must always be honest and open, and on the other hand doing what he did. As a result, you not only have a knot in your head, but you carry this dichotomy with you through life. Because of the abuse, I often became very aggressive for no particular reason, even in my marriage. So I hurt people without meaning to. They couldn't handle it, of course, but neither could I. I couldn't control it. I often withdrew completely. For example, I sat in the corner at parties and just whined. But that's just the impression. I wasn't grumbling. I wasn't there at that moment. Then, of course, you are labelled as an oddball. You have a hard time getting by in life and making friends. You always slip back into that rut. That was also the case during my apprenticeship. It was like that my whole life. In marriage, it went on without my ex-wife being able to help it. I never talked about it. I can't tell you today why not. Maybe it was too early. Today, I can talk about it without faltering emotionally. It was different then. I wouldn't have had the heart. I preferred to keep the lump in my throat rather than talk about it. In retrospect, I can say that instead of the event with my ex-wife, it could have been any other event of that severity. It was already inside me. It was this event that triggered it. In retrospect, I asked myself, why is it like that? The whole story is very upsetting, and you don't want to open this Pandora's box. But someone keeps knocking, and eventually it breaks out. The fear, when I was sitting there after that event and I had this cold feeling inside me, it scared me so much that I thought, if you continue like this, there will be a catastrophe. You are a potential mass murderer. Somewhere, someone triggers you, and you explode uncontrollably. Shoot him. I had to prevent that. Then I went to therapy, but it didn't help.
After the near-death experience?
After the near-death experience, yes, after the 4-day hospital stay. My ex-wife came to visit me, brought me something to read, and told me she had found the love of her life. To say that, in that situation, was fatal. After that, on the advice of the doctor treating me, I started therapy, which led me completely astray. Incidentally, I knew the therapist beforehand through my training as an aviator. He was also an aviator. We had a regulars table here in Berlin, and that's how we knew each other. He said, "Come to therapy." He also knew my ex-wife. His efforts were biased. He tried to boost my ego and undermine my ex-wife. That's when I said, "You can't do that in therapy." In the meantime, I had started psychological training myself shortly before and saw this mistake he had made. He doesn't talk to me anymore today. I then just withdrew from the idea of doing therapy because this whole search in anamnesis, in retrospect, didn't work. I told him about this near-death experience, which he didn't understand at all. So we talked past each other, and it was pointless to continue. Going back to the encounter with Jonas then opened the doors. I tried to orient myself further, to accept that. Then I realized that I only get anywhere if I open the door.
That is, you were initially unable to accept the experience yourself without reservation.
Yes, it was such a state of limbo. It was Well, it's there, but it's not tangible for me. I want to go there, but I don't know how. I can't talk about it. Who can I confide in? Then later came this near-death group, and it got a little better. It was a very, very long process to open the door to heaven again properly, which had once opened briefly through the near-death experience. There was also a certain fear. Meet again this story that you had. It was an overwhelming experience that left its mark. It was as if it had happened yesterday.
Were you a person of faith, or in the East German tradition, more atheistically oriented?
Absolutely, 100,000% atheist. I enjoyed my confirmation as a youth in the Protestant church, which, by the way, I have now been to again, and was able to absorb completely different impressions. Through this event, doubts arose about my rejection of everything divine. After all, there are many who are of the opinion that there's no such thing. Today, as a former atheist, I understand why people think that way. It's a certain rejection, a fear of getting involved with something foreign that you can't grasp. I didn't go in the other direction myself straight away, but at first I founded companies and only looked after material things. There was also a kind of financial pressure because I had put all my eggs in one basket for this education. I was penniless and had to earn money again. That was not possible following this path, so I inevitably had to take another. About 12, 13 years later, I had a new relationship and a 5-year-old girl came into my life. The daughter of my partner's sister, so my niece. At first, she didn't look at me at all. Then, one day when we were having coffee, she came over to me, snuggled up to me, and from then on wouldn't let me go. At first, I didn't know how to behave because I had never had such an encounter before. I don't have any children myself. I took her in my arms and then we spent a lot of time together. She was often with us. One day, she said, "I want to sleep there." She crawled under my covers, and my partner didn't like that at all. Maybe she was jealous or thought I was groping the little girl. My partner did not know my history of abuse and could not have drawn any conclusions. Furious, I went out of the bedroom into the living room and lay down on a self-made emergency folding bed, 70 centimeters wide. After half an hour, the little one stood in front of me. "Can I get in with you?" Bam, in. I was afraid of crushing her. She snuggled into my arm and wrapped her fingers around my hand. After 2 minutes, the fingers began to twitch slightly. Then I thought, now she's drifting off to sleep. It was like a déjà vu for me of this absolute love, this unconditional love that a child is able to give, without reservation, without demanding anything, giving trust, primal trust. At that point, the moment with Jonas was there again. You have to look for something again, and that was primal trust. This little girl showed me what primal trust is. That overwhelmed me so much that from that moment on, I got the turning point to this faith or to the divine. That was the turning point in the whole story.
On your homepage, you write, quote, "And I'm doing great since I went from being atheist to understanding heaven." To what extent did your near-death experience change your view of the world? What has changed in retrospect?
It was decisive. If I had not experienced this fateful event and the consequences of suicide and near-death experience, I would still be an avowed atheist today. You can answer that so clearly. It was like a kick in the butt, so to speak. This is your last chance. At last, turn around. Why? I cannot explain. I will only have this deep insight later, when I am no longer here. My capacity is not enough to comprehend it. Back then, I opened the door to heaven and left it open. By the way, that's the drawing you can see here. Close the door, open a little, and keep opening. That's the way it shows. Today, the door is wide open. Actually, I've taken the door off its hinges and put it aside. I have intense conversations with Jonas. They are matters of the heart and not literal conversations. I have questions for Jonas, and through this picture that I was allowed to perceive at that time, which was indeed full of gaps because my understanding was not there, I'm forever gaining further connections or absolute clarity through his really sharp pragmatism. There's nothing flowery, everything is beautiful and you're just in the meadow. It's not like that. These conversations are so intense that at some point I thought, why don't you write that down? That's how I came to write. Given that I don't read thick books myself, I wanted to put it into simple, understandable words and shorten it. After all, it's a complex event that I want to convey. That's why I write short stories.
How can you imagine these conversations with Jonas in practice? You have a question in your heart and turn to Jonas with it?
In the sense that I dedicate myself to a topic like ego or addiction, focus only on this topic, and, in this dialogue with Jonas, I discuss the problem I have with it. He gives me tips and I pass them on. In the beginning, I wrote down afterwards how the conversation went, and often I don't have a solution then. It's just a little signpost and I have to work on it. He says I have to work on it. He just gives me a hint. He can't and won't give me more than that. Otherwise, I would be tackling too much knowledge with too little inner development of my own, and that would be fatal. I wouldn't be able to cope with it and would yield nonsense. With my impatience, I keep bumping into him, and so there are heated arguments. Friendly ones, of course. But the conversations aren't always easygoing. That's not how it works.
So it's an inner dialogue.
It's an inner dialogue. Nowadays, I speak directly into a microphone and can better understand what he has said. And so it goes much faster.
You speak what you hear inside yourself.
I'm really speaking this. This will probably also then be published on video, in a real dialogue with an external voice.
Do the sensations you have during these conversations with Jonas qualitatively correspond with those you had at the time in your near-death experience?
It is the same. It's as if I'm in that moment and I'm talking to him. Of course, he rejected me then, which I didn't like at all. Today, I have found the reason why I had to go back. But I don't have the solution yet. I could say, I'm done now, so take me home. But there still seems to be something unresolved. Today, I am grateful for every day. Every morning I think about these conversations that we have 2, 3, 4 times a week. And I work on the things that move me. Things that, for example, also let me deal differently in dialogue with other people, with more composure, with much more understanding. Because I'm allowed to have more and more insight into how and why what aspect is connected with whom. Also in relation to the question of guilt towards my father, in order to be able to forgive him. In retrospect, it has become clear to me that he too was only a victim of his inclinations. It wasn't my father, it was the inclination I was dealing with at the time. He was also a victim. He didn't recognize the limits, you can say. I understand why someone does something. I don't necessarily have to fathom it out more deeply, but I can understand it, which I couldn't before.
You formulate in the introduction as a reference to your books, quote, "The conversations with Jonas often deviate from what is usually written, because Jonas has a very different overview than any we could ever have from our human point of view." So what insights might come to your mind spontaneously, of which you would say, "Out of myself, I would never have considered anything like that in that form"? Can you give an example?
I was very concerned about how the time of death is determined. The common view, which is also held by researchers, is when brain death has occurred, when no more brain activity can be detected, then death has occurred. I know from Jonas that this is true, but also not. Yes and no. Brain death in itself is physical. It explicitly separates the physical from the spiritual and from the paradise spirit. But the essence of a human being is not physical. The soul is incarnated in the body and has to detach at some point. That is a very different story from physical brain death. Many speak of a silver cord or a bond that connects body and soul. But that's a very vague way of putting it. I wanted to know exactly, where then is the connecting point between this metaphysical and the physical realm? It is in the interbrain and is a kind of magnetic point. When the physical body dies, this energy slowly dissipates within 6 to 8 hours. In a normal death, not in an accidental death. And then that connection dissolves and the soul disappears. That is a process. Death occurs, from this point of view, when the person crosses the threshold that I once experienced. Then there is no turning back. Before that, perhaps a return or reversal is still possible, as long as this place still has some sort of connection.
What is your big picture? So dying is a process of resolution. And what is the significance of our earthly life in the big picture of being?
People are meant to learn here. They come from another realm. They were so-called angels of paradise, but still imperfect, yet endowed with certain parts of light. We are in an imperfect world. We are here to return to this life level of our origin. Jonas gave me the example. Imagine the low-frequency radiation, all the way up to gamma radiation. We are in the low-frequency radiation and able to live here. With our inner learning, we come more and more shortwave. And then we are able to exist with these short waves. This is perhaps a difficult example, in the higher plane of life. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to stand it. We would not be able to stand it in the sense that, as in democracy, for example, we are prepared to stand up for each other, to carry the community, and to accept the whole as such, and also to live it from within. People often ask, what can heaven do for me? Why am I doing so badly here? Why is no one doing anything? But most people don't see that it is up to them to grow inwardly, or they have lost this view. I have found it again. It is a complex matter. In this world of opposites, in polarity, in human conflict, in friction with each other, we learn to then be able to live there with this experience. We will continue the series of incarnations until we have learned it.
How would you classify the meaning of near-death experiences? Is what near-death experiences describe actually a glimpse into the afterlife as it will be after death, or rather a transitional experience?
I can interpret it for myself as I experienced it, and as I still try to implement it today. I feel it is an absolute grace to be able to experience something like that. It is a groundbreaking experience. That is how I would still see it for me today, an orientation for my own behavior here on earth. I want to get there again. That is a goal. It was more than a glimpse. It was formative for my onward path in life. That is where real life takes place. Here, it's a kindergarten. You can leave it like that. This is really kindergarten. We are embedded in a great event. A span of life is available to us here. Nothing is infinite, not even there. There are cycles of life that are infinite. Time is a very different concept there, but it exists. On this whole stage of life, I described it in a book, we can rise from being the scene setter, which we are here, so to speak, to being the director or producer. From today's perspective, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, people take themselves too seriously. I would say that today from my own experience.
They take themselves too seriously in their role.
Yes, in statements like, we explore the universe. But in the visible universe, we only find material realities. And these are embedded in the so-called principle of change. Everything that is matter changes. We cannot break out of these life cycles. Even planets have to follow them. In all these great events, the individual often takes himself far too seriously, and that can cause great damage.
Looking back in your life, on all the stages, on the insights, do you have the impression that your whole life follows some guiding entity?
Ultimately, I can't answer that question. I find it difficult to assume or presuppose that my path is preordained, if that's what you mean. Then it would make no sense to give people free will. That would be a contradiction for me. So far, I have classified it in such a way, also strengthened by Jonas, that I receive certain rules and guidance. I determine my own path individually. Everyone else does that too, depending on what they bring with them from previous incarnations, from their previous being, in order to seek experiences here, to have experiences. Whatever one brings and uses for oneself is the sum of previous experiences. I don't know to what extent I'm being guided. In this respect, I'm still searching. But I would interpret what is happening in such a way that it is not predetermined. But there are only guiding principles, such as the parental home. And you have to see what you make of what you bring with you. It is a tool. The physical aspects too. And we are obliged to make the best of it. I'm also writing this in a book now. We are all rough diamonds and we have to cut ourselves. What counts is how we sparkle afterwards. Everyone is accepted as they have developed, and everyone will develop differently. Hence this diversity and individuality.
I think that was a very good conclusion. Mr. Nikolaus, thank you very much for your openness. I wish you every success with all your projects, and thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you too.